Greetings, I am Brother Judah, a member of the Congregation of Israel, or Moreh Yehuda. I am also a representative of the NMP, the Nazarene Messianic Party. I would like to welcome all of our listeners to What Is to Be Done podcast. Here we investigate geopolitical, historical, biblical, social, and other scientific content. We approach the Bible from a social-political perspective, and I argue that is the appropriate way to approach the Bible, because the Bible deals with nations, kings, empires, society, civilization. In short, it deals with social sciences and politics, just to name a few, actually. Today, I would like to investigate the Bolsheviks a little further. A lot have been said about the Bolsheviks. And those of you who's not familiar with the Bolsheviks, briefly, the Bolsheviks were a radical Marxist faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party that seized power in Russia during the October Revolution of 1917. And I had explained before that when you hear Marxism, people may get the wrong impression, but the Marxism of today, or many who call themselves Marxists, are estranged and alienated from the Marxism of the early revolutionaries, whether it was Lenin, whether it was Marx or Engels themselves, or Chairman Mao's and other revolutionaries, Kwame Nkrumah's. And today is a little different, or is a lot different. People call themselves Marxists today. But the same thing is with Christianity. We, as I said before, we approach the Bible from a social political perspective. We believe the Bible, the whole thing, the entire thing, but we are not religious in the traditional sense. And so just as we would say modern day Christianity is definitely alien and estranged from the early church movement that had taken place in Judea roughly 2,000 years ago. And thus it is also offset from the earlier first covenant church movement that took place under Moses several millennia or a few millennia ago. So our job is to look and to understand and try to find out what's what without just assuming we know what things mean. I want to investigate the Black Panther Party and the Bolsheviks. The Black Panther Party and the Bolsheviks. We have a misunderstanding, I will argue many people do, on the Bolsheviks as well as the Black Panther Party. Now, when we were discussing Martin Luther King, who was killed, if I'm not mistaken, in 1968, there was a young group of people who began to come on the scene and cause a stir. And from my understanding, they was between the ages of 15 and 21 or 24. This was a group of young people called the Black Panther Party, founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. They came on the scene at a perilous time. Martin had been killed, and what appears to have happened is that, as the FBI argued, that Martin Luther King, he was the greatest threat to national security. There was no other leaders like him. He was very educated. Often the things that he said has been misrepresented or go over people's heads. But I'm saying that to say is that the youngsters who come up after him did not have proper direction. And because they didn't have proper direction, they was misled, and thus they had made grave mistakes, especially pertaining to revolution, whether it is armed with iron swords or whether it's armed with ideology. What's so powerful about the Bolsheviks, even in their revolution, it was very little armed struggle that had taken place when they assumed power because of the legwork they were doing and on the ground educating and informing constantly among the people, informing the people. And this is a process you can't cheat because Jesus of Nazareth, he did the same thing. He had to go from city to city. He had to teach and educate because ideological warfare and the battle of ideas is the war that changes everything. That is exactly what brings up kingdoms and bring down kingdoms. Even before Moses could get started, it is written in the Tanakh that he had to go and talk to the elders, and he himself wondered who would believe him. And so he had to go and convince them to join hands in the protest against the exploitation of Pharaoh. So this process of getting out and teaching and speaking with people is a process you can't cheat if you want success. And it is probably not as easy as it was before. It wasn't easy before, but now it is really something because of modern day technology. It really has isolated people where you could be in the same room and just as quiet because they're occupied by these devices. And now it becomes downright strange for a stranger to come up to you and start talking. But the human is a social creature, and once this type of tactic is employed again, they will adapt to it. But nevertheless, Martin was killed, and we was looking in the FBI files. And one thing we're finding in the FBI files is that the FBI were concentrating on the Communist political party. They were concentrating on that, and they had them under supervision. And so they began to document Martin Luther King's interactions with the Communist Party and the Socialist Party. But when we were looking at that, we were finding out that there was a concern with the FBI for years, for decades, about the Communist Party effects on the Negro, or the so-called Black Americans, or foundational Black Americans. To Mr. A.H. Belmont from Mr. W.C. Sullivan, and the date here is kind of smudged, but it looked like it's 1963, September 25th, under the subtitle Common Agreement. He said, "First, I am sure we are all in agreement on the following, which was in both the cover memorandum and the detailed brief attached. For the past 44 years, the Communist Party USA has spent enormous sums of money and ceaseless efforts to influence Negroes and to make communists out of them. The 19 million Negroes in the country today constitute the greatest single racial target of the Communist Party." Now, this is very much true. This is very much true. It's documented. This is what the Communist Party was doing, aka the Bolsheviks. This is exactly what was happening. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is this a good thing or a bad thing? However, as we pointed out before, if you ask the Klan, that's what old Trotsky, where they smeared him being a part of the Illuminati. That's what they thought about him, being a bloody Jew. But going further into this, let's see what the Klan had to say, or what they thought about it. The Klan want to fight against communists. We are here to fight communism. And the communists were the Bolsheviks. So much so, this is a flyer out of Seattle, Washington, and we have the Klan in Alabama saying the same thing. Negroes beware, do not attend communist meetings. So this FBI discourse in the 1960s, the Communist Party have been trying to organize so-called Negroes or so-called Black Americans. Okay? Now, moving forward in the discussion, this memorandum for Mr. Belmont, Communist Party USA Negro question, communist influence in racial matters. What we find is that they're showing, it says here, showing communist involvement in Negro racial matters in this nation relative to which we can all agree. The position taken at the time, the brief was written, was that while there is communist influence being exerted on Negroes, the Negro leaders, it has not reached the point of control or domination. So we see that it was spreading at this time. And then we find a memorandum, same thing, SAC letter to the field. It reads, my second reason why I think that the SAC letter should be sent is related to the present changing situation in the Communist Party, Negro relations area. During the past 2 weeks in particular, there have been sharp, stepped up activities on the part of the communist officials to influence and to dominate Negro developments in this country. So it says further, they are meeting with successes. So they was very concerned about this. It says subject of deep concern, another subtitle, same letter. May I repeat that our failure to measure up to what the director expected of us in the area of communist Negro relations is a subject of very deep concern to us in the Domestic Intelligence Division. We are disturbed by this and ought to be. Okay, so this is in the mid to late 1960s. This sets the historical, political backdrop for the Black Panther Party, who became known on the scene in the late 60s and early 70s and began to fade off in the early 80s. The Black Panther Party, where this analysis of the Bolshevik influence on the Black Panther Party, people talk about the Black Panther Party, but they very seldom talk about the Bolshevik. Now, I would like to read a text, We Want Freedom. Most High willing, I'll have these links in the description box. I got to do better at doing that so you can look at it yourself. But We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party by Mumia Abu Jamal. And it was the introductions by Kathleen Cleaver. Now I'm just going to go to a couple of excerpts here. One on page 125. 125. It speaks of, this is the subtitle. The chapter is chapter 6. The Empire Strikes Back. COINTELPRO. The Empire Strikes Back, COINTELPRO. This is the counterintelligence program by the FBI. And this is chapter 6, and we're looking at subtitle War Against the People, page 125. War Against the People, page 125. Mumia writes, in 1919, the first director of the Bureau of Investigation, the forerunner of the FBI, J.W. Flynn, aptly described his agency's objective when he noted, quote, the Bureau required a vigorous and comprehensive investigation of anarchists and Bolsheviks, along with kindred agitators. So in 1919, J.W. Flynn, this is the forerunner, the Bureau of Investigations, which was the forerunner of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Mr. Flynn says he and the agency is required to do a vigorous and comprehensive investigation of the anarchists and Bolsheviks. So this is roughly 1920. So when we're looking at the FBI files, when they said that they have been investigating the communists for 44 years, then you just add 44 years on top of 1920 is going to take you to roughly 1964, 1965. So I'm trying to follow this historical timeline. The Bolsheviks haven't did anything to threaten you, that is the working man, whether he's white, whether he's black, whether he's Latino, whether he's Asian, whatever. The Bolsheviks' constant threat are found within the capitalist regimes. Why the Bolsheviks? Because as we explained before in another session, the leader of the Bolsheviks, when we were looking at this, the leader of the Bolsheviks, Vladimir Lenin, as he began to bring forth the principles which became known as Bolshevism, not only did Lenin appeal and show the solidarity between Russians and the Negroes in his February 1913 article, Russians and Negroes, he also explained the conditions in Russia many times in all of his writings, but you will also find them, or should I say all of his writings, the volumes of his writings. So we find it again here in Lenin to the Royal Poor in 1903. And he was explaining that the Bolsheviks, they want to achieve a new and better order of society. In this new and better order of society, there must be neither rich nor poor. All will have to work. Not a handful of rich people, but all the working people must enjoy the fruits of the common labor. So not just a handful of rich people who get all of the fruits and the enjoyments of life, but all the workers should have a right to it because they're laboring for it, they produce it daily. Lenin says machines and other improvements must serve to ease the work of all and not to enable a few to grow rich at the expense of millions and tens of millions of people. This new and better society is called socialist society. The teachings about this society are called socialism. The workers' unions which fight for this better order of society are called social democratic parties. So what we're looking at, they are arguing for freedom. Lenin says, but the workers do not yield. They continue to fight. They say neither persecution, prison, deportation, penal servitude, nor death can frighten us. Our cause is a just one. We are fighting for the freedom and the happiness of all who work. We are fighting to free tens and hundreds of millions of people from abuse of power, repression, and poverty. Now, we know they're probably not lying. I don't think they're lying. And you know what? I don't even think that the Ku Klux Klan believe that they're lying either. And that's why I had this down here. When we're looking at them, if you notice carefully, I point this out. This, what we just read with Lenin's discourse in the Rural Poor 1903, he was arguing about social equality. And so when we're looking at the Ku Klux Klan flyer, that's exactly what it's saying that the communists are fighting for. Paid organizers of the communists, which are the Bolsheviks, are only trying to get Negroes in trouble. Alabama is a good place for good Negroes to live in, but it is a bad place for Negroes who believe in social equality. You see? Now, with that being said, let us just listen to one of the. In fact, we want to listen as we introduce this here. Now, the Bolsheviks, which were the communists, the FBI felt it was a problem, and they eventually began to have a problem with the Black Panther Party. Why is that? Because the Black Panther Party, if we go back to this text, We Want Freedom by Mumia Abu-Jamal, and we turn to page 20, a quick excerpt. Mumia says this about the organization. The organization had which is the Black Panther organization. The organization had an ideological affinity to Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. They had an ideological affinity to Marxism, Leninism. And so this what ties them right in historically. It ties them right in historically to the Bolsheviks, because the Bolsheviks were a radical Marxist faction of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party that seized power in Russia during the October Revolution. They overthrew their oppressors. And the capitalists don't want you to know about it, don't even want you to be friends with them, because you may get some terrible ideas that will affect the foundations of capitalism. But nevertheless, it says, led by Vladimir Lenin, they later evolved into the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So the Bolsheviks and communists become synonymous. Its ideology based on Leninist and later Marxist-Leninist principles, and later on it actually became, they added Mao because of the revolution in China. And don't believe the hype about Mao either. Hopefully we're going to get to talking about him too, and the great things he was able to do, and the principle in which he built on was actually found in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4 actually. But we'll deal with that, God willing, in the future. So Mumia Abu-Jamal is saying the Black Panther organization had an ideological affinity to Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism, aka Bolshevism. And so the FBI had their mark on the Bolshevists. Thus, the Black Panther Party became a target. The Black Panther Party, that's why they became a target, because of their Bolshevist teachings. That's why Martin Luther King became a target, because he was being influenced and began to reflect Bolshevik teachings. Now, if the Ku Klux Klan against the Bolsheviks and all of the rich people against the Bolsheviks, why you poor people need, us poor people and the workers and the laborers of the world and the exploited of the world need to do a double take. We need to look at this again. You see, that's what I'm arguing. We need to look at this again. So let's look at this Black Panther Party, and we're going to look into a little bit of Fred Hampton. People are familiar with Fred Hampton, but we got to look at this Black Panther Party a bit and understand this thing going on here with the Black Panther Party and the Bolsheviks, the association between the two. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to say it again, and this is from being based on biblical principle. these two groups, which historically have been labeled as anti-God, arguably are more godlike and more charitable than many of the people who sit in the pews and run around on Sundays and Saturdays or at their mosque. All of these religions of peace and love, there is no demonstration with these religions. In the Muslim religious countries, there's no demonstration of real peace and love. You have oppression and suppression all over the place. And even, I want to follow up with the Iran controversy. All of a sudden now people want to be on Iran. Like I tell people, I said, listen, you see somebody get knocked in the bushes and carrying on, and you want to sit up here and go to their aid, but you don't know that the reason why they got knocked in the bushes was because they deserved it. And people say, well, how you know they deserved it? Because they did this and they did that. So I'm interested to know what the Communist Party of Iran have to say about the government of Iran. But those are the discussions. See, we get brought off into the media. All right, we listen to the media, but we have to be able to dissect things on our own and not fall to their narratives. And sometimes I know how it appears to be. A lot of things appear to be. Even some people have the gross misunderstanding that I am following the traditional media narrative of the present day administration. Gross misunderstanding. Gross. But I'm not going to argue about it like that, you see. What I would encourage people to do, take your time, pay attention. All right? After a while, people don't really want to listen well. And because of emotions, they begin to make the wrong moves and say the wrong things and think the wrong things. And we have done this. We have been taught to do this about these two parties. And they're very much standing on biblical principles, whether they knew it or not. But by us studying the scriptures, we can make these points and arguments. So we're going to look at the Black Panther Party, their affinity to the Bolshevik teachings. At the same time, we know we have the FBI as a target on them. The Communist Party of the Bolsheviks have been since 1920. When we're looking at the Black Panther Party, we're looking at the late 60s. The FBI have already been on a coattail of the Bolsheviks. Why? Because they don't want the Bolsheviks to influence the Negroes. What do you contemplate it? Don't argue with me. Even if you're listening this far, just think about it. Think carefully. Maybe the enemy of your enemies may be your friends. Maybe the enemies of the working class people, enemies, may be our friends. Now, whether the Panthers have the affinity, they have the affinity to the Marxist, Leninist, Maoist teachings. Look what Fred Hampton says, and I want you to pay attention closely on how he understood the development of the Negro. But right now is going to be a little discussion going on when they're trying to introduce you have a group of men who's introducing a credit union to the Black Panther Party, and Fred is going to critique it a bit, and that's going to cause a little frustration. But I want you to pick up when he says what he's calling a revolution is the movement to a communist state. Listen carefully.
You basically knowing my ideology, and basically you knowing me knowing yours, you can support some of our programs. Is that what you're saying?
Why not?
And you believe in programs like the Breakfast for Children program and free health clinics? Right on, brothers?
We believe they're good things.
Uh-huh.
As a focal point to organize their mothers and fathers.
Uh-huh.
Peace.
Mm-hmm. There's no educational program here?
That's come out of the social action thing. You set that up, brother. I mean, we can't put everything on one piece of paper.
What about this bank?
Credit union?
Mm-hmm.
Credit union. Credit union, my brother.
Is a bank.
Are you hip to credit unions? It is a bank.
Yeah, you go and borrow money.
Yeah, it's a bank. It's a bank. Owned by the people, run for the people, and by the people.
What will money be given out to people for?
Well, the people would decide that. You want to buy, you know, whatever, you know, the people in the community decide.
You need some living room furniture, maybe? You need a car, maybe?
See, the thing is with me, you dig, I need to know some more about it. I wish you had some more literature about the educational thing here. Because, you dig, as far as we're concerned in the struggle, the way we look at struggle is that this depends on the educational thing, you dig. Because
this depends on the education.
Well, the whole thing.
No, but in the end, this does. You can form this with no education. You can form this and this.
No, not the way we're talking about forming it. You know, right. We're talking about forming it right. You know, it's not on the paper. We didn't write it on the paper.
You can form it right with no education.
No.
Let me give you an example. Jomo Kenyatta formed the excellent revolution with no education. And on the day of the end thing, Jomo told the motherfucker, said, well, you know, you can educate, hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I'll help you lead the revolution. Now I'm going to oppress you. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face. But he moved all the white people out and he took over and be oppressor. He did, because of no education. And the people that had been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucking white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what it's going to be in the finale. A lot of people, Jomo Kenyatta is called never a revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So is Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mao's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. But what we're saying is that it's the end. That you don't judge Castro now. You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's a people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be an educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we'll have Negro imperialists.
All right. So you see that educational program was very important for the Black Panther Party. Chairman Fred Hampton argued that they must go through, people who want to be a part of the party had to go through 6 weeks of political education to become a part of their party or organization, or AKA church, assembly. And they had to go through political education. And the problem was, if they don't know why they're doing what they're doing, especially in the context of banks and credit unions, he said they could become a Negro imperialist or capitalist. So we see the disdain that the Panther Party had for the capitalists. But they were encouraged or encouraging the proof of true revolution by explaining the movement to a communistic state. Again, look how he was explaining. You can't judge Castro at that moment in the 60s because you didn't know where he was going. And he gave an example of China, and he was showing how China will be understood to be revolutionary if they move into a communistic state. Now, this is confirming with what Mumia Abu-Jamal brought out, how the Black Panther Party, that is, had an affinity to Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, which is China Communist Party leader, doctrines and teachings. So look what he says again about China.
Yeah, to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? with no education, the people that take this local foundation, you've been educated to hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I help you lead the revolution. Now I'm going to oppress you. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face, but he moved all the white people out and he took over and be oppressed. He did, causing no education. And the people that have been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucker white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what is going to be in the finale. A lot of people, Jomo Kenyatta is called not a never a revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So is Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mao's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. But what we're saying is the end. That you don't judge Castro now.
So he's talking about the goal of the revolution. When he's saying the end, you can't judge Castro because it just happened. The Bay of Pigs and all that was just happening. This is the Cold War era that we're listening to at this moment. But when he's saying the end, the goal, now notice what he mentions about China and the movement to real revolution.
You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people that take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's the people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be an educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we'll have Negro imperialists.
So thus we hear from Chairman Mao, chairman of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party, 21 years old, and he confirmed with Abu Jamal, or Mumia Abu Jamal, was arguing that they are in affinity or students of the Marxist, Leninist, Maoist ideology. And this had to be taught so they can understand why they're doing what they're doing, because they wanted to move to a just society. Same society that Lenin was making reference to. Same type of society. And it is important for us to understand these things because to this day, the people are still toiling. To this day, there's suffering all over the globe. There still isn't an equitable redistribution of the world's goods. It is still a concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. If you just for a moment consider the ideas of the Bolsheviks and also consider the ideas of the Black Panther Party and all those who have that same sentiment, if you was to just turn your Bibles, take your time and go into your Bibles to Luke chapter 6, the Gospel of Luke chapter 6. And it's something interesting there because we had said before in Amos chapter 5 verse 9 how the Creator, he strengthens the spoiled to go against the strong. He strengthens the spoiled to go against the fortress, to take the fortress. Now the fortress and the citadels is where all of the the fruits of exploitation is. The grain, the wealth is all barricaded in a fortress. And so what we're looking at is the Creator giving the strength to the oppressed and the exploited to gain was theirs. When the children of Israel had left Egypt, in our Bibles, the revolutionary Moses, it's recorded that the revolutionary Moses told them to go and borrow of the Egyptians. And if you look that word borrow up in the Hebrew, it carries a stronger meaning than we understand what borrow means today. Other texts use the word ask. But you look it up in the Hebrew, it means to demand. To demand. And this fits the context of the rich man who came to Jesus of Nazareth asking, what does he need to do to inherit the reign of justice, which is called the kingdom of God? The Messiah demanded of him to take all your wealth and distribute it to the poor. Now, he walked away. And I will ask people to this day, why did he tell that rich man all of it? Why not some of it? And people give me this generic answer, well, he was testing his heart. Well, we all probably had the same heart at one time or another. Can you give me anything else? He could test his heart by saying giving 25%. Test your own heart. Ask yourself if you were standing there, if he demanded the same thing of you. Now, many who don't study the passage may think the demand was turn over all of your riches. Now you out in the street as a beggar. That's not what the passage was arguing, because there is a social context to that passage. And that's not what it was saying at all. But nevertheless, there was another meaning that even gave Jesus of Nazareth the authority to demand that of the rich man. It was the same reason why the children of Israel was able to demand the wealth from the Egyptians. And we got teachings on it. Now, if we go back to Luke chapter 6, look at the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, because a lot of people called him a devil too. Got all these people call themselves Christians, and they very, very seldom do, many of them at least, very seldom do what Jesus of Nazareth said do. But those are other subjects. We all was there at one time or another, but we have to seek. Now in Luke chapter 6, if we want to analyze the moral rating or the moral justification of the argument of the Black Panther Party, of the Bolsheviks, and others, let's look at in Luke 6 what Jesus of Nazareth said. In verse 20, in fact, I want you, just so you can follow along with us here, I want you to go to Luke chapter 6, the Gospel of Luke chapter 6, and I want to begin reading at verse 20. Luke chapter 6 and verse 20. And you could actually read down to verse 26 if you would like. But we're going to read the first part of this passage. First part, Luke chapter 6, verse 20. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, Blessed be ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. Blessed are ye when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. What in the world you doing that's aggravating people, aggravating the heck out of people so much, they don't even want you around them. It seems like when you say Jesus now and everybody claim they love Jesus, the Arabic form of Christianity called Islam and all of its various sects and denominations and all of the various denominations of Western Christianity, the Russellites and AKA who call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. You have the Episcopalian, the Baptist, the Methodist. Then you have all of these so-called Hebrew Israelites and all of their different groups and One West and all of his other Chicago groups and all of their different camps. And you find it all over the place. A lot of people that say a good thing about Jesus. You could be a Buddhist and argue, and even those who are Buddhists will compliment Jesus and compare him to Buddha. So what is it that Jesus was saying that the rest of these people not necessarily talking about, that nobody gonna want to be in your company? You're gonna be an adjutant. He said, blessed be ye poor. Now, what if you follow up with this to people? When he says, rejoice, verse 23, rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. And mind you, that heaven is not off in the sky somewhere. We got other teachings to show you about that heaven. It's not off in the sky, though. But what if you follow up with this? Maybe this is what's going to cause people to not really want to be around you. Verse 24, but woe unto you that are rich. It was preceded with a woe. Danger zone. Problematic. Woe unto you who are rich. Everybody want to be rich nowadays, it seems. Woe unto the rich, for ye have received your consolation. See, it wasn't just this one rich man this time. He's talking about the rich class, the capitalist class, the aristocratic class. He argues, this peasant prophet argues, woe unto you that are rich. You have received your consolation. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep. Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets, to the false messengers and teachers. Oh, they speak well of you, got some money. You got to be a success if you got some money. You will pack out a room if you got some money and can show somebody else how to get some money. That's why I see all these Negroes getting defrauded now. Cats getting on YouTube and everything else, got their little schemes, charlatan schemes. They always telling you how you can make some money. They pack out a room and then upset when they get defrauded. I said it's rather curious that all of the people who've been defrauded, I'm sorry to hear it, but all of the people who've been defrauded, is very interesting that they all had capitalistic endeavors and they found themselves bitten by the serpent of capital. But those are the discussions as well. Woe unto you who are rich. Very interesting. And I would have to say, woe to the czars, because they fell in 1917. And I would have to say, woe unto the capitalists and all of the rich exploiters of the world today, because this isn't over. This isn't over. In fact, at a time of peace and safety, then a sudden destruction, or in a sense where when you least expect it, all of the injustices shall come to a full, and when you least expect it, the exploitative empires and systems shall collapse. They already fractured. Heed the warning. So let's look at this a bit. So Fred Hampton is talking about the exploiters and this movement that they were encouraged by. The Black Panthers was encouraged by this movement of the Bolsheviks. the Bolsheviks, the poor and oppressed European brothers and sisters who fought for liberty, and God strengthened them. And they overcame their oppressors. They overcame those who exploited them, those who robbed them and caused them to suffer. Why? Because of determination. They said nothing will turn us around. Lenin taught, and that's the type of faith and determination the saints of God must have for the same cause of liberation. When they said, according to Lenin, in the rural poor, the struggle for urban workers, the workers say, we, millions of working people, have bent our backs long enough. We have worked for the rich and remained paupers long enough. We have allowed them to rob us long enough. We want to unite in unions, to unite all the workers in one big workers' union, to strive jointly for a better life. Very interesting. See, we believe the same thing. And who started this movement for us? This isn't a Bolshevik thing. They're not the epitome of this movement. Karl Marx isn't the epitome of communism and socialism in his movement. No. We'll take this all the way back to the early societies of Adam, the early societies of Noah, and it began to be categorized and put in legal code to be implemented to the world by way of a nation as it began to be codified by Moses. However, this striving for a better life is very interesting, that even the leader who began to resuscitate and to drag the initial movement of the ancient children of Israel out of their arrested development, that leader who began to lead them on such a revolution is a blue-collar worker himself. Jesus of Nazareth was a blue-collar worker. He was a builder, a carpenter. You see? Very interesting how that lines up. But ultimately, the determination is what I'm talking about. The workers said, the workers argue, according to Lenin, but the workers do not yield. They continue to fight. And they say neither persecution, prison, or deportation, penal servitude, nor death can frighten us. And that's is when you begin to seek the face of God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and with all your strength. You begin to lay your life down for a just cause, because the habitation of God is justice. If you seek justice, you seek in the face of the Almighty. And we got other teachers to prove that to you. Now, before we close, we want to follow up with Fred Hampton. We've seen this video, and he also have a speech that he held November 1969 at Northern Illinois University. This was before he was murdered. It is called It's a Class Struggle. It's a Class Struggle. And this is by Fred Hampton. And let's see what ideology and platform that the Panthers was running on to confirm what we're saying. Fred Hampton says, a lot of people have hang-ups with the party because the party talks about a class struggle. That's interesting, because we just read when Jesus was explaining, in his name, they're going to speak evil of you. when you start to say woe to the rich class and say power to the people, poor class, they're going to speak evil of you. So Fred Hampton seemed to be confirming this historical fact that I know a lot of people have hang-ups with the party because the party talks about a class struggle. And the people that have those hang-ups are opportunists and cowards and individualists and everything that's anything but revolutionary. See, Jesus was revolutionary. When you're saying woe to the rich and and to the poor, lift up your heads, because yours is the inheritance of the kingdom of God, and you saying the rich shall lose what they have, the full and the rich, he said, you shall lose what you have. You was full, now you're going to be hungry. That's revolution, people. What are they losing in order for them now to no longer be rich? What are the poor gaining in order for them to rejoice and be fed? You're talking radical changes, revolution. And all individualists and all the opportunists and anything like them have hang-ups with this type of a teaching, and none of these are righteous revolutionists. Fred Hampton continues. He says, and they use these things as an excuse to justify and to alibi and to bona fide their lack of participation in the real revolutionary struggle. So they say, well, I can't dig the Panther Party because the Panthers, they are engrossed with dealing with oppressor country radicals or white people or hunkies or what have you. Yeah, because they followed or believed and was learning from the ideology of who? Marx, Lenin, and Mao. So there your white people go. They not listening to Marx because he's white. They not listening to Lenin because he's white. These white people, just like we have here. You have all these white people who's willing to stand in solidarity because they understand it's not about white or black, as Fred said in the video. It's not about white or black. We don't want the oppressor no matter what color you are. We're talking about justice for all men. And just because the Panther Party did not discriminate and they embraced others, oh, they were called, oh, I ain't mess with that party because they mess around with white folks. Fred said, we got a lot of answers for those people. First of all, we say primarily that the priority of this struggle is class. Marx and Lenin and Che Guevara and Mao, Tse-tung, and anybody else that has ever said or knew or participated or practiced anything about revolution always said that the revolution is a class struggle. It was one class, the oppressed, those other, the oppressor. Period. One is going to rejoice, one is going to weep, according to Jesus. And Mao and Lenin and Che Guevara, he gave shouts out to. And let us look at Fred say it again in his same speech. He says, we move in and we're saying that there's no better, there's no higher Marxist than Huey P. Newton. So he's calling Huey P. Newton a Marxist. No, not Chairman Mao, Tse-tung, or anyone else. We're saying that unless people show us through their social practice that they relate to the struggle in Babylon, that means that they're not internationalist. That means that they're not revolutionaries, truly Marxist, Leninist, revolutionaries. So he's saying Huey P. Newton is a Marxist, and he stands on par with the rest of them, pound for pound, because he was the influencing teacher of the Panther Party, Huey P. Newton being one of them. Yeah, he's saying none of them better than Huey, but of course I understand this to be a figure of speech, but nevertheless, he's showing and giving props to Huey, but he's a Marxist. And Fred continues, because our line, which is their political line, their political belief, their political ideology, because our line's been consistent, we know Marxist, Leninist, people who might not want to dig on it, they say Marxist, Leninist, they don't use profanity. And so then he gets off and saying, no, we use profanity. We're going to keep on using profanity. But the point being here, because he was explaining, because we in the hood. Yeah, you're looking at a 21-year-old. I get it. But what we find here, our line's been consistent. We know we Marxist Leninist. That's what Fred Hampton, quote unquote. They're Marxist Leninist. The Marxist Leninists were communists. As Mumia Abu-Jamal said, that the Black Panther Party had an affinity to the Marxist, Leninists, and Maoist teachings. The Marxist, Leninists, and Maoists were the Bolsheviks. It was these Bolsheviks who wanted to organize the world to free the oppressed of the world. And I'll add this, we're going to close. This is a secret to some, but those who study the literature is not. The Bolsheviks, one of the leaders, he's actually in this picture right here to the bottom, and he is to the left of Lenin, and we talked about him earlier, Trotsky. He even argued that the success of the Bolshevik Revolution will not last unless the Negro stands up and become the vanguard of the global permanent revolution. And he argued that once the Negro stands up and becomes the vanguard, which means the leader, being a part of the leader group, once they stand up, Trotsky says, then he believes a great block of white workers will follow them. Follow them where? Where does the Bible fit in? We'll show you. But right now, we just want to look into some history. And all this that we have discussed today are the fundamentals and biblical principles. All of it. So with that, I'm Brother Judah of the Congregation of Israel, Moreh Yehuda, a member and a representative of the NMP. I'd like to thank everyone who have taken a time out to listen to our podcast, What is to be Done, as we have discussed the Black Panther Party and the Bolsheviks, and analysis of the Bolshevik influence on the Black Panther Party. Again, as I said, here at What is to be Done, we deal with geopolitical, historical, biblical, social, and other scientific content. Well, God willing, we'll meet again with more discussions. I'd like to say peace and blessing to all of you who are sincerely searching. And he who has an ear, let him hear. And hopefully, Most High willing, we'll meet again.